Hello, my name is Tyler Farah and welcome to Lesson 8.5 Test Day Readiness. In this lesson, we're going to talk about essentially what to do each day between this day and test day in order to make sure that you are as successful as you possibly can be on the MCAT. In particular, we're going to talk about how you'll know when you're ready to take the MCAT. We're going to talk about the tools that you have at your disposal as you continue to prepare for the MCAT. And we're going to help you build a study plan that's customized to your needs that covers, again, each day between this day and test day. With that in mind, let's begin. First, the all-important question, are you ready to take the MCAT? Here are some things to think about to help you make up your mind. Have you completed all the required homework? Have you been consistently scoring in a range you'd be happy with? And finally, are you feeling nervous about this test? Well, keep in mind, nerves are actually a very good thing. They're our body's natural physiological response to things that are important to us. If you're feeling a healthy degree of nervousness, that may actually indicate that you are ready to take the exam. If you are concerned that you may not be ready by test day, make sure to reach out and get some expert advice before you make a decision about whether or not to delay your test date. You can call 1-800-CAP-TEST or reach out to your instructor and have that conversation. An important consideration as you prepare for this test is your high score guarantee. This is a feature of the course that allows you to either re-enroll in the class again for free or extend your access for several more months if you don't feel completely ready to take the test. It's important to point out that most students don't need to use their high score guarantee. However, either way, it is a nice reassurance to know that you have a backup plan already in place, built right into the course. So you want to make sure that you remain eligible for the higher score guarantee. The good news is you do this by simply completing the requirements of your course. That is, if you've been to all your scheduled classes, if you've taken your scheduled full lengths, and if you've completed the required homework, you are already eligible for the higher score guarantee. Finally, as you can see, if you do decide to utilize your higher score guarantee, you need to submit the claim for that within 3 months of your course expiration date. Let's now focus on building a study plan between this day and the day of the exam. Remember, a good study plan actually starts by listing out all of your required professional obligations and personal obligations outside of the MCAT itself. By doing this, you'll actually reveal the blocks of time that are available to you for pure MCAT study. Maybe you've got all of Saturday available, then you can take a full-length practice test and review it a little bit. However, you aren't always going to have such big blocks of time. Maybe you've only got 3 hours in the afternoon after you've finished your classes. Well, this is the perfect amount of time to take a section test and review it. Maybe you've only got 30 minutes in between 2 of your classes. Well, this is actually just enough time to take a practice passage on the QBank and review it. The point is, by building up a study schedule, you're going to see what kinds of blocks of time you have available, and then you can fill these blocks of time with the appropriate resources. To see what I mean, let's take a look at a couple of sample cases and the study calendars that would be appropriate in these cases. You might even recognize your own situation amongst these. Case 1. I am not caught up with my homework from the course. I want to point out, if this describes you, not only are you not alone, but this is actually such a common scenario that it's the first case that we're going to consider. What should this person do? Here's a sample study plan. What I want you to notice is that, yes, this person is definitely prioritizing completing any remaining homework. And that's good because the remaining homework does have both content review and practice built right into it. However, just as important, I want you to see that this person does not wait to start taking practice full-length tests as well. There's this common trap that some students in this situation fall into where they say, I have to get ready to take the practice tests. I want you to know that it's actually the opposite. You don't get ready to take practice tests. Practice tests make you ready. So jump into taking practice tests, even if you haven't yet reviewed all the content, even if you still have homework left to do. Balance both practice and review. Case 2 is another situation that everyone will be in, because even if you're a little behind right now, eventually you'll get caught up on all the homework, and then you'll be left saying, well, I have a few weak content areas, but I've finished all the homework. Consider this person's recommended study plan. There are a couple of key features here that are common to anyone studying for the MCAT. This person has scheduled in a practice full-length test each week, and we recommend not taking any more than that. Keep in mind, a full length itself is exhausting. It's mentally and emotionally taxing, and it takes time to build the stamina back up to sit for another one of these. Also consider, this person is going to have to review any full-length practice test that they've taken, and you see that built into their study plan as well. Notice that to fill the gap in between full lengths, they've also scheduled in smaller individual sections or even QBank review or flashcards as stopgap measures to practice throughout the week. Finally, case 3, I'm feeling pretty confident about the test. This person's study schedule also has good advice for anybody prepping for the test. Again, I want you to notice the common pattern that they are exhibiting. What they're doing is they take a practice full-length test, they review that practice full-length test, and then this person turns to their weak content areas and studies them. As you prep for the MCAT, no matter what situation you're in, you need to juggle these 3 elements: practice, review of practice, and then studying weak areas. The best formula for doing this is to start with practice. Then let your review of practice reveal weak areas, then study and practice those weak areas before coming back to take another practice test, and the cycle starts over. One final piece of advice when building a study plan: some students make a calendar, and then each week they don't accomplish all they set out to, and this can lead to the defeatist attitude of like, why do I always keep failing my study plan? I look at that situation from another perspective. Maybe you're not failing your study plan. Maybe your study plan is failing you. So as you consider the question on screen, keep in mind that we are discussing general principles. There is no cookie-cutter study plan, and likely you're actually somewhere in between the cases that were just described. The best way to ensure that your study plan doesn't fail you is to remain flexible. If you don't get to all the things you've planned out in a week, then consider which things you did that week that were most valuable, and consider how you might adjust your plan for the next week, recalibrate, and keep a good attitude. Given that a big chunk of your preparation for this exam is going to be based on practice and review, let's talk about some common problems that come up and how to address those. In particular, the Kaplan tip has got some really great advice here. If you come across a problem in your test day performance, try something different. Try a different approach. Change the way you're attacking this test in such a way that you address that problem head on. Some specific problems that might come up. The first one is very common for students, especially early on. I'm not finishing every section in time. The way to address this is to really practice managing those time points. Make it the focus of your next practice test to say, I'm going to stick to those time points and stay on time throughout the test so that I'm not struggling to catch up at the end. Also, something that many students fall into is referring back to the passage whether or not they need passage information to answer a question. If you find yourself falling into this trap, ask yourself, do I even need passage information from this question? If the answer is no, I can answer this question using outside information or big picture understanding, then do that and move on. Now, if you're approaching MCAT strategy appropriately, you should be narrowing down questions and guessing amongst the remaining answer choices. The MCAT is in fact designed to reward test takers who do this. A consequence of this is that it can feel like you're always getting it down to 2 choices and then picking the wrong answer. But think about it. When you review your tests, which questions stand out to you? The ones where you got it down to a 50-50 and guessed wrong, or the ones where you got it down to a 50-50 and guessed right? Of course, as human beings, we naturally tend to hone in on our mistakes, and this can be discouraging. So a sanity check is to go back over your most recent test and look at not just the questions where you guessed wrong, but all the questions where you got it down to a 50-50, and how many of them did you guess right? It can be a real great reassurance that the strategy is in fact working to look at all the questions that you guessed on instead of just focusing on your mistakes. And then one more strategic element. It is natural to feel fatigued by the end of the test. A natural response to this is to say, well, I'm going to go practice and build up my endurance as if I were training for a bicycle race. The problem with this is that human beings are simply not designed to sit in a chair staring at a computer screen and answering multiple choice questions for 7.5 hours straight. So while practicing will help build up your endurance to a degree, you're always going to feel exhausted at the end of a practice test or even the real thing. One way to mitigate this is to take liberal use of your breaks. Use all the breaks you're given. Use the full 30 minutes of break time for lunch. And then also feel free to take lots of in-seat breaks. You might even consider after every passage taking 5 to 10 seconds to close your eyes and take a nice big deep breath to prepare for the next passage. Now this last point brings us full circle. What do you do if you find yourself consistently missing questions on the same topics? I bet you can guess what the answer here is. Study and practice those topics. Again, this feeds back to your preparation schema. Take a practice test, review that practice test for weak areas, and then go study those weak areas. In the second portion of this lesson, we will use these ideas to build a plan for each day between this day and the day of the actual test. Welcome back to lesson 8.5. In this second half of the lesson, we're going to be building a study plan for each day from this day up until the day of the test itself. Recall from the first portion of this lesson that the basic idea is to use practice to diagnose weak areas, then go study those weak areas before coming back to take another practice test, and so on and so forth. This basic set of ideas should be continued as you prep up until the week of the test itself. That is, specifically, you're going to continue to focus on weak areas, using practice tests to find and diagnose these weak areas. And once you found a weak area, go back and study that weak area to turn it into a strength. I like this last bullet point as well. Don't forget that pacing, triaging, endurance, and all the other strategies are as important to your success on the exam as are your content areas. So those things can count as weak areas to be diagnosed and worked on as well. Keep in mind that as you do practice, you want to simulate test day conditions as closely as is possible. And so I want to spend a moment talking about these test-friendly habits. It's going to be a quiet environment at a computer, and yet people are going to be moving around. They're going to be getting up to go on breaks. They're going to be shuffling their scratch paper, coughing, sneezing, creaking their chairs. A really good place to simulate these kinds of things is like the computer lab at your library or a very quiet coffee shop. And finally, remember to continue to reevaluate your study schedule and remain flexible to any changes that may need to occur. Continue this routine right up into exactly 1 week before test day. This day is dry run day. Specifically, get up at test day time, go through your test day routine, eat your planned test day breakfast, and then hop in the car or get on the bus and actually go to the test center. And another piece of advice, as long as you're at the test site, you might as well go in, map the course to the nearest bathroom, basically make sure that you've taken as many unknowns out of your test day experience as is possible. And then you know what? As long as you are going through dry run test day, you might as well stop at the library on your way home and take one more practice full-length test. Now, this last note, start going to bed at an appropriate time. This is basically a reminder that from now until test day, you're going to be sticking to a regimented routine, going to bed at the appropriate time and waking up at the appropriate time all week so that you're on a good sleep schedule for test day. And then the week of the exam is not about cramming for the MCAT. Rather, the week of the exam is all about rejuvenation. A good way to facilitate this rejuvenation is to develop a strong, reliable routine. Eat good meals at regular times. Think about the time of day that you're going to be eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner on exam day, and make sure that you try to mimic that to the best of your ability throughout the week leading up to the exam. That's similar for your sleep-wake schedule. In fact, sticking to a test day friendly sleep-wake schedule is actually the best way to ensure that you fall asleep easily on the night of the exam and get a good solid night's sleep. And finally, while you definitely want to focus on practicing for the test, and you certainly want to try to mimic test day conditions, the week of the exam is not necessarily the best time to be cramming in additional full-length practice tests. Rather, prioritize smaller practice opportunities, individual sections from the MCAT, or even a few passages at a time are great ways to get MCAT-like practice without taxing your psyche. This week of the exam is all about routine. Build a strong routine, stick to that routine, and that will ensure that you are rested and ready for test day. Here it is, the day before the MCAT. Think back to another milestone day in your MCAT preparation, specifically the first day of your Kaplan class, where you learned the MCAT Lucky 7 study habits for success on the MCAT. We have here a round 2 of the MCAT Lucky 7, specifically 7 rules for the day before the MCAT. And in the same way that those 7 study habits from day 1 have sustained you and helped you up to this point, these 7 rules for the day before the MCAT are going to help you get through this last day up to the test itself. In particular, don't talk about the MCAT the day before the MCAT. And as well, avoid studying for the MCAT. What you should do instead is plan your day. Do something that you know you're going to enjoy that gets you out of the house, up and about, moving around, maybe spending time with people you care about, doing anything other than sitting around at home stressing out about the MCAT. And another really good stress reliever is to think about what you're going to do after the MCAT ends. Eat high energy foods, eat well the day before the MCAT, basically take care of your body, again, to help you mentally prepare for the task ahead of you. And that includes getting enough sleep. Finally, as one sort of Zen warrior way of getting ready for test day, put your test materials together, put them in a bag, and set that bag by your shoes, by the clothes you have picked out, by the door so that you are ready to go, and you know you're not going to be running around the day of the test looking for socks, looking for IDs. You've got all that stuff already ready to go. Speaking of the items that you want to have with you on test day, let's talk about a few particulars. First off, it is required that you have a government-issued photo ID for check-in procedures. Get that out and check to make sure that it won't be expired by test day and that the name on that ID exactly matches the name you used to register for the exam. We also recommend that you bring a second form of ID just as a backup, and also your confirmation email, as that will have all of the important test center information written right there. As for the next several items, these are things that will be good to have during break. The only things that can go into the test room with you are your photo ID and your earplugs if you're using them. So things like snacks or sports drinks or lunch or any break time reading materials, these are going to be left in a locker outside of the test center, and you're only going to have access to them during the breaks. A good thing to know about earplugs is that they must be unopened and in their original packaging. When you arrive at the test center, the proctor will open the earplugs, inspect them, and then hand them to you so that you can take them into the test room. These last several items are all things that would be nice to have, although you don't necessarily need to have them. It depends on your personal preferences, and that's why the last item is actually write your own thing here. Again, the same caution applies. You're only going to be able to access these things during the breaks. Here it is, the big day. Notice how well prepared your plan has got you for this event. You're going to wake up at the same time you've been waking up all week. You're going to eat the same breakfast you've been preparing for yourself all week. You're going to go through the same physical and mental routine to get ready for the test that you've been practicing all week. You're going to wear clothes that you've picked out based on your knowledge of the environment inside the test center that you gathered when you actually visited the test center. You're going to bring the snacks and other supplies that you packed in advance the night before, and you're going to get to the test center with plenty of time to spare because you've already driven the route to get there, and you know for a fact how long it takes to get to the test center. Once you're led into the room with the computer, the first thing that you're going to do is a tutorial. This is a great chance for you to get settled in, to quiet down your physiology, and to mentally prepare. During the exam, stick to your strategies. Trust your training. There's going to be points during this exam where you get a little flustered. And in those moments especially, stick to your training and stay positive and moving through the exam. Finally, consider how you're going to spend your break time. Practice even now, pushing out the last section's performance and focusing just on what's in front of you. Keep charging forward. Once you've finished your MCAT, you're going to be asked one last very important question, which is, do you want to void your scores? I can tell you that for me, this was a very tense moment because I was sure that I had bombed my MCAT. However, I didn't void my scores. I went ahead and submitted them, and it turned out that I did better on that MCAT than I had ever done in practice before. What had happened to me is what happens to many test takers. After 7.5 hours of taking the test, I was in no position to objectively judge how I'd just done on that exam. And in fact, for myself and many test takers, feeling a little beaten down, exhausted, maybe even discouraged at this point, that might be an indicator that you just gave your best possible performance and you're sitting on a great MCAT score. So if you felt the test was hard, if you felt like you guessed on a few questions, even if you didn't finish every single item on the test, remember, that was the plan. Trust your training, submit your scores, and go off and relax. On the other hand, there are a couple of valid reasons why you should void your score, and they boil down to basically any circumstance that had you leave the computer while the clock was ticking. If you got physically ill and had to run out of the test center room, if there was, for example, a fire drill that caused you to leave the room, those would be objective reasons why you might void your score. Otherwise, submit. Having submitted your exam for scoring, you walk out of the center, and I don't have to tell you what a great feeling that's going to be. What do you do now? Relax. Have something fun planned for after the test, some kind of a celebration or some kind of a big event. In fact, this is actually important for your preparation overall. Having some sort of a celebratory event planned for after the test will actually help keep you motivated in the days and weeks leading up to the test itself. Let us know how you did on your exam overall, and keep in mind that the MCAT still represents just the first step in a much longer journey overall. Kaplan actually has services to help you prepare your application, and if you're interested, you can call 1-800-CAP-TEST or speak with your instructor to find out more. Finally, keep us updated with how your MCAT turns out, where you get into medical school, where you go on to residency. I know that myself and the other Kaplan instructors, we keep doing this because of success stories like yours. Use the tools described in this video to build your personal study calendar right now. If you have any questions along the way, get in touch with Kaplan to get the answers that you need. And remember to focus on both practice and content review as you build your study calendar. Speaking of which, keep in mind that at this point in time in the class, you have literally learned all of the strategies that will make you successful on test day, and you've seen all of the content that the AAMC will test you over on test day. So focus on success, on honing your skills and your content knowledge, and keep the big picture in mind as you move forward. For myself and the other Kaplan MCAT instructors, congratulations on the gains you've seen already, and keep charging forward for MCAT success.